Okay, let's dive right into today's explainer, the ultimate revealer, unpacking the Incarnation. We're going to explore a really profound and honestly often neglected paradigm shift in the New Testament about who Jesus actually is. We are drawing from Dr. Robert A. Peterson's fascinating analysis on special revelation, and specifically the staggering reality of the Incarnation. You know, it's one of those topics that is so familiar to some of us that it's kind of lost its shock value. But today we're going to wipe the slate clean and look at it with completely fresh eyes.
So think about this for just a second. How do you touch the invisible? It sounds like an absurd riddle, right? Especially to the ancient Greeks who strongly believed the divine was entirely separate from the messy physical world. But it perfectly frames the incredible theological paradox we are unpacking today, the immortal, invisible creator of the universe actually entering into his own creation and becoming a flesh and blood creature.
Let's start with Section 1, the ultimate revealer.
You know, we so often look at Jesus strictly as our Savior, or maybe just a great moral example. But Dr. Peterson points out something really crucial here. We frequently miss his primary role as the ultimate revealer of the invisible God. Jesus isn't just delivering a message from God like some prophet. No, his very character, his words, and his actions are a direct, highly concentrated manifestation of these divine attributes. When you watch Jesus act with mercy, or exercise sheer power over a storm, or demonstrate perfect wisdom, you are not just seeing a good man, you're actually watching God's character played out in human history in real time.
And this brings us to what I think is a kind of funny, but incredibly profound moment with one of his disciples, Philip. So Philip asked Jesus for this massive, sky-parting theophany, like a spectacular, visible manifestation of God. He basically says, hey, just show us the Father and that'll be enough to settle all our doubts. And Jesus is almost exasperated. He replies, have I been with you for so long and you still do not know me? He's explaining that simply looking at him is looking directly at the Father. He literally is God in the flesh, perfectly explaining the invisible God.
Moving right along to Section 2. Touching the invisible God.
Now, this revelation wasn't just some distant vision up in the clouds. It was a reality they interacted with every single day. Listen to how the Apostle John writes about this. The apostles ground this abstract theology in cold, hard reality. They literally heard his voice teaching the crowds, they saw him heal the blind with their own 2 eyes, and most shockingly, they touched him with their hands. They physically touched the word of life. As Dr. Peterson points out, claiming to touch God with your bare hands is an idea that would have absolutely blown the minds of Greek philosophers.
All right, let's demystify a bit of seminary jargon here. Early church fathers called this the communication of properties, and what this brilliantly illustrates is that Jesus is a single, unified person with both divine and human natures. For example, the Apostle Paul writes about the rulers of the world crucifying the Lord of glory. Now, you can't exactly crucify an invisible spirit in heaven, right? But because the eternal Son of God took on true human nature, a real body and a real soul, you can have a sentence where a divine title, Lord of glory, undergoes a painfully human action, crucifixion. It's wild to think about.
Okay, Section 3, the Word made flesh.
So how exactly did the eternal Son make this absolutely colossal transition into human history? Well, he actually took humanity upon himself permanently. Dr. Peterson explains this using the 2 states doctrine, charting the staggering progression of Christ. First, there's the state of humiliation. This means Jesus willfully subjected himself to a lowly human life, literally giving up the independent use of his divine powers in pure obedience to the Father. This state spans from his humble birth in Bethlehem all the way to his agonizing burial in a tomb. And then we see the state of exaltation. That's everything from his victorious resurrection onward to his ultimate eternal exaltation at the second coming, where he'll finally establish his kingdom.
When the Gospel of John describes this incarnation, it says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. But there's a fascinating double meaning here that we often miss. The word John deliberately uses for dwelt literally translates to tabernacled. And that is a direct echo of the Old Testament sacred tent, the tabernacle, where God's overwhelming glory once resided. Back in the book of Exodus, God's glory was so intense that even Moses couldn't enter the tent. So John is signaling that God has now set up his tent among humanity, inside a human body.
And this sets up a really incredible contrast between Moses and Jesus. John's comparison states, the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Now, this doesn't mean there was no grace in the Old Testament. Instead, Dr. Peterson notes this is an ancient Near Eastern idiom of stark contrast. The law of Moses was deeply good and glorious, for sure, but it is completely eclipsed into nothingness by the unimaginably greater grace and truth revealed in the person of Jesus. It's kind of like comparing the light of a tiny candle to the blinding light of the sun.
Let's hit Section 4, Witness to the Light.
To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of this revelation, we've got to look at the guy tasked with preparing the world for it, John the Baptist. The history here is just amazing. In an era where a literal John the Baptist cult was forming because of his massive influence, it's fascinating that the Bible explicitly notes he performed absolutely zero miracles. Think about it. There had been no prophets for 400 years, and suddenly this guy appears, does no signs, and is universally accepted as a prophet by the Jewish people. Why? Because the unvarnished, self-authenticating truth of God just poured out of his mouth.
Because he was so great, people naturally wanted to worship him. So the absolutely crucial point here is that John aggressively denied being the Messiah. When questioned, he insisted over and over, "I am not the Christ. I am not the prophet. I am not the light." He knew his exact role. He was merely a witness, like a giant neon signpost pointing toward the true light that was stepping into history. He had to decrease so that the true revealer could increase.
And that brings us to our final section, number 5, rejection and reception.
Let's look at the stark reality of how humanity actually reacted when that true light finally arrived. The Gospel of John is brutally realistic. It isn't a fairy tale where everyone recognizes the hero right away. Instead, it presents the unthinkable tragedy of the Incarnation. Dr. Peterson translates a famous phrase in John 1 to mean the Creator came to his own home, the very world he built, the very people he formed, and his own creatures looked at him, rejected him, and ultimately crucified him. We have a high priest in heaven who deeply, truly understands what it means to be rejected by the ones you love.
According to the text, the arrival of this special revelation isn't just some interesting historical claim. It forces a profound decision upon every single person. The source outlines 2 paths. You either face the tragedy of ultimate rejection, literally trying to shut out the light and remaining in darkness, or you experience the incredible grace of profound reception. Those who receive him, who actually believe in his name, are brought into fellowship, quite literally sharing in the life of God. The invisible God made himself perfectly visible. The Creator became a creature. He tabernacled among us, full of grace and truth, and the whole universe shifted. Which leaves us with this final, profound thought to carry with you today. When the eternal light finally enters the room, do you close your eyes or do you open them?